All right.
So this is a very modest space, but I work modularly. So I don't have a large enough space where I have designated locations for all these different sections of work, but I have to modulate, so I'm using this space for one thing and then another thing and then another thing. It just depends. I try not to lose my tools or a pencil. That's the main thing. Where's the pencil?
All of them.
But now this piece here, this is actually a great granddaughter of Henrietta Lacks, and that Henrietta Lacks, as you know, is the most recent commission that I'm working on. So via Zoom, we had a little, conversation. So on the basis of that Zoom and the pictures I got from it, I built up this clay model and then cast it in plaster and then molded it in plaster. Molded and cast it in plaster. So it turned out pretty good. And I just have to put a base on it. And my purpose in doing that was to just familiarize myself with Henrietta Lacks, her lineage, and maybe there's something in her face here that will help me, assist me in building up the resemblance for her, too, for Henrietta. And just in case nobody knows who, your readers may not know who Henrietta Lacks is, this was a African-American woman. She was actually raised in a little tiny town called Clover, not too far from here. And then her family, when she was still a child, so she was born in Roanoke, and which is why Roanoke is having a statue erected of her. Then her family moved up to Baltimore, and when she was 31, she got cervical cancer and went to Johns Hopkins for treatment and died in great pain, as a matter of fact. And after she had passed, a technician took a sample of her cells. And this was, at that time, that kind of thing was done rather commonly. It would never be done now, but up to that point, a person's cells, when they were in a test tube, just died. But her cells, which were cancerous, multiplied, and they kept multiplying and multiplying, and they split them and they started sending them to labs, and then they were used in various procedures, and now I think there's actually trillions of them, and they're all over the world. And in fact, I have a good friend who's a scientist, a chemist, and he has used HeLa cells, they call them, Henrietta Lacks, HeLa cells. So that was her story, and she was really a forgotten woman until a book came out by Rebecca Sklootz called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and it's a terrifically fascinating story. So, and so that is how the story has come to the surface again. So I was commissioned to do a sculpture of her based upon these drawings here. Now there are almost no pictures of her. This is her for probably the late 40s. And this is her husband, Day, and there's another picture of her. And there's another, what is it here? There's a picture of her also. It's not much to go on. It's pretty much it. And Bryce Cobbs, who's a young African-American artist, he was commissioned by the Harrison Museum in Roanoke. Trish White Boyd, who's the vice mayor, really got behind this project, raised the money and everything. So, and she commissioned Bryce to do these drawings, and then from these drawings, I built up the sculpture itself. And that meant that I was, first of all, making a maquette, a small model, about 24 inches high, and that would be about 1/3 life size. So I spent a lot of time on that, trying to get that just as accurate as I could, accurate to the drawings, anatomically accurate, getting the dress accurate and everything. And then once I did that, I took it down to the foundry. I use Carolina bronze in Seagrove, North Carolina, and I've worked with them for 30 years or so. But I took that maquette down there and they digitally scanned it and enlarged it, and then up to full size in a polystyrene foam, just like I've done with Calling the Powers. And then I went down to the foundry, brought that back, carved it, did some carving on it, finished carving on it, and coated it with clay and did all the finish work, all the detail and everything. And then once I was finished with that and it was reviewed and okayed, I took it back down to the foundry, and that's where it is now. So at present, actually on Friday, I'm going down to review the wax positives. So that's a stage here, and I can show you very crudely anyway what we're talking about here. So this is a piece, The Joy of Seclusion it's called. It's actually, this is a bhikkhuni, that is a Buddhist nun. This is the original clay model I make, and when you take it out, the model out of a mold, it also a lot of times breaks it or deforms it, and that's what happened here. But that's okay, because I got this mold here from doing that. It's a two-part mold here, like this, and you see the two parts. And then this here is called a mother mold because it mothers the rubber, you might say, and holds the form. And so you've got these two parts here. This really, well, so now I've got the empty form. Like I can put it back together like this. As things happened, I use wax like this, and produced from this mold a wax positive, they call it. And again, when and then from this wax positive, I made another plaster mold over this. As you see, it all deformed this thing, and I took the plaster mold apart, took this out, put that plaster mold back together, and then poured plaster in there, and then broke that plaster mold off. And so now, and then I poured it in resin, and it's down at Damasuka in Missouri now. But we're talking about a multi-step process, and this is just on a little simple piece too. So a large piece, it's a lot more complicated and time-consuming, but it's coming along. So, and we are due to unveil that piece on October 4th in Roanoke. I'm not sure of the time yet, but maybe 16 blocks can. Oh, yeah. I'll provide information on that, so you know when that's happening. And so
that if you've got a minute, that leads us to just a couple questions.
All right.
But thank you for taking the time to describe the process.
Yes.
People know what goes into it.
Yeah.
It's such detail, and it's such importance, because it's a public monument. It's going to be there for as long as monuments are there.
Yeah.
We're in a similar way interested and involved in public art pieces. Like the murals, and Rita recently painted the downtown piano, and also with public sculptures. I'm curious about the nature of the artist, that most of the work is in a public setting, and different in a gallery or museums.
Right.
You're referring to the piece on the Greenway, which is seen by joggers, and people taking a morning walk or eating lunch. The kind of public art gallery.
Yes, it is.
Coming out of here, and it's like your own garden.
Yeah.
How does that influence? It's a different kind or similar kind of artist, but your space is in public.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, there's a lot of satisfaction in giving a community what it desires to have. So when I did, for example, this fallen officer memorial down in Roanoke, that the police were very happy to have this piece. They helped me a lot and answered all my questions, provided all the material I needed. I got to know a lot of police officers that way. So it felt really good to do something for the community like that, which they appreciated. If you're doing a piece for your own, you in a way you don't really know if anybody is interested. Calling the Powers is fantastic because I made this thing and it's turned out to be fantastic. People love that piece. Love that piece. Wow. Wow, if that is great, that is really great, but you don't know. You don't know.